Hello and welcome to our second official Google Play Games show. Not a game show, but a show about Google Play Game Services.
Important difference.
Yes. I'm Todd Kerpelman. I'm a developer advocate here at Google Play Game Services.
And I'm Bruno Oliveira, and I'm a developer programs engineer in the Google Play Game Services. And we are broadcasting actually from our advanced physics lab, where we are researching very advanced materials like this invisible Android doll.
Yes, I've discovered I now have the X-Ray app on my phone, which is pretty cool. It looks through all sorts of organic matter, which I think that'll be coming out pretty soon. We're working on that.
Exactly. So as you can see, that's very advanced and top secret stuff that we have here.
Yes.
And this is in no way a green screen.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I did not realize until I was in the studio today that this is fake. I thought this was a real background. So we're letting you in on the on the magic.
And actually, the real background is right over there. It's just there's a camera there, and there's a green screen over here projecting the background that's over here. Just so that we can have this transparent Android doll.
It's really just for the gimmick.
Exactly.
So we are here to talk to you today about building web games with Play Game Services. It's because I realized that up until this point, we've been talking an awful lot about mobile. We've been talking an awful lot about Android and a bit about iOS. But you know, web game developers, you're people too. You need love. And we're here to give you some of that love in the form of a demo and a presentation that Bruno has put together.
Talking about advanced stuff, let's switch to a presentation.
Yeah,
right?
I thought this was just going to be like a casual talk, but like Bruno prepared slides. So
12 slides.
Yeah.
So anyway, so let's talk about building web games using the Google Play Game Services. We're going to give just a very quick overview of how to set up your game, because we're not going to go through all the steps because we wouldn't have time. But let's just give a quick overview of the steps. So yes, we do have a web API for Google Play Game Services. And if you go to developers.google.com/game/services and look at the left side navigation menu, you're going to find a whole section there about web games. So you're going to find both the client-side setup and the client-server setup. So there are basically these two options for web games. You can either do a client-only setup, where you have essentially a client-side HTML and JavaScript and no server component, or you can have the client-server setup, where your client side essentially serves as an interface, and then the server is the component that actually makes the API calls. We're going to talk about only the client side here because it's simpler, but the server side is also not very difficult. The only difference is that you have to pass your token to the server, and then the server is going to make the API calls. But to set up the client side, so first of all, you should have done the initial setup. So you should set up your game in the developer console first. Once you have that done, then you can from the client side, you can start by loading the API. And then you authorize, which means showing the authorization dialogues if they are needed. And then you can start making the API calls as soon as you get the callback saying that you are signed in. So setting up the game is actually pretty easy, and most of the code is just pretty much copy and paste from boilerplate. So just load the client.js, and then you just write that to initialize the Google Plus API. Once you have that done, you're going to get a callback saying you are authenticated, and that the APIs are loaded, and that's the point where you should authenticate. So if you just call gappy.auth.authorize, you can start this authentication process. If you call it with immediate equals true, that's going to mean that the API is not going to show any pop-ups. And then if you call with immediate equals false, that means that pop-ups may be shown, which means that you should first try to authenticate with immediate equals true, and then if that succeeds, well, that's very good. And if that fails, you can call again with immediate equals false once the user clicks a sign-in button.
I'll break in here and say immediate equals true generally succeeds if the user has signed into your application in the past. So this is usually for returning players that have already signed in, they've already accepted. You don't want them to have to press a sign in button every time they visit your game. And so this call essentially tries to log them in behind the scenes. It's when that attempt fails that you then say, oh, all right, maybe we should show a hey, click here to sign in button. And that's on clicking that sign in button, that's when you would make this call with immediate equals false.
Exactly. And the reason why this is not automatic is that most browsers block pop-ups. So if you try and show a pop-up without the user having clicked a button, that's usually going to get blocked. So this is why it's important to first try to call with immediate equals true, and then if that fails, then you wait until the user clicks a button, and only then do you call with immediate equals false, so that you don't get that blocking behavior. So next, once you have your authenticated, you can either use the API by calling request for everything. So you would call request, and then you have to pass the parameters and so on. But there's actually a very handy service called Discovery Service. And the Discovery Service means you can actually make the REST API calls in a much more convenient syntax. And to use that, if you first have to load your API using that syntax, which is gapi.client.load. Then in this case, I'm loading the games API version 1. And then this is the callback that's going to get called as soon as that API is ready. So when I get a call to onAPI loaded, I know that I can start making the calls. And the calls look much more convenient than what you would see with request. So for instance, if I want to list the player's achievements, all I have to do is call gapi.client.games.achievements.list. And that's going to generate a request that I can then execute and then pass my callback. And once the callback gets called, you're going to get the result of that call. So you can check for errors, and if there is no error, then you can do whatever you want with that result. In this case, I'm just iterating through the achievements that the user has and then doing something with them. So this just illustrates, just in a few minutes, pretty much the summary of how to use the web API. Well, of course, we do encourage you to take a more careful look at the documentation, because there are many more details to this. So with that said, let's go on to the demo. So this is a demo that we've been writing called Firewall Defense. So this is what it kind of looks like. This is a screenshot. This is the first screen, and then when you play, this is the actual gameplay. For those of you who know me, know that I have a certain passion for retro games with very big pixels. So this is one example of such game. So I'm running an instance. The source code for this sample is available on GitHub, but I'm running this source code on my private App Engine instance. So this is what you're seeing here. So this is the game running. So I have this initial screen where I show the top three scores in the leaderboards. I have my achievement screen. I'm actually already signed in, so I don't need to click here. But for somebody playing the game for the first time, they would have to click sign in. Then I have the achievements over here. So I'm showing in green the achievements that I have, and then in gray the ones that I don't have. So as you can see, I've been playing this a lot, but I haven't really gotten a very good score yet, unlike some people in the leaderboards. And then I have the high score screen, which shows my social leaderboard, so the high scores from my friends, and then it also shows the public high scores from everybody. So as you can see, I'm I think in 7th place in the list. No, actually that's 8. There are 10. So I'm reduced to 8th place on my own.
That's
game.
okay. I'm not even on that top 10 list anymore, but I am in your social list. So
exactly.
That's good.
So you are at 4,050 points. So let's show the actual gameplay. Hopefully the sound's going to come out right. Let's see. So all right. So this is where I try to beat everyone's high score. So you have these enemies that you can shoot, and then they disappear. Then, of course, one of the challenges of the game is that there are not only these enemies, but also these allied packets. And if you shoot them, they become missiles that are going to try and destroy your firewall. Once you run out of firewall, you lose the game, and that's your score. I just scored 500 points. And of course, if that score had been bigger, I would appear in the my place in the leaderboards would change. But my score was not that big. But I'll try harder later.
Sounds good.
So, yeah. So that's pretty much the demo.
Cool. So let's bring up a few things that people might be asking after seeing this demo. The first is we noticed that we were able to see a list of achievements and a list of high scores now on Android, iOS devices. They're widgets. Wait a minute. I've been informed I need to adjust my mic. How's that? All right, I'm getting a thumbs up.
Okay.
So on Android, iOS, we have widgets to display achievements and high scores. Did you have widgets that you were able to use here?
No. If you're doing a web game, since every web game is pretty much different, so there are no ready-to-use widgets. But it turns out that the API is actually pretty straightforward to do that. All they have to do is it's called the load APIs, and then you get a callback whenever you have the data loaded. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here in achievements and the leaderboards. I just make a call to the load API, and then when I get the callback, I have the data, and then with the data, just format my own HTML with that data.
And so getting the data should be pretty straightforward.
Exactly.
Most of the work the developer is going to need to do is any CSS magic that they want to, say make an achievement look nice versus an achievement they haven't earned or that sort of thing.
Exactly. So making achievements look nice is not in the scope of the sample. As you can see, they look pretty disastrously ugly. So what I'm doing here is I'm just showing the. This is actually one of the things I really like about retro games is that I can use that as an excuse to have very poor graphics.
That is true.
So This is just and I'm actually showing the icon for each achievement. So when you're setting up achievements on the developer console, you have the chance to upload an icon for each achievement, and that's the one that I'm showing. The fact that it's always the same is just because of my complete lack of artistic ability, and I'm just using the same icon for every achievement. But if you had different icons for different achievements, you would be seeing them here.
Cool. I'm also going to ask about, now I know that we talked about during your presentation, we talked about calling gappy.auth.authorize to sign the user in, but I know that for this particular sample application, you're using the Google Plus sign-in button.
Oh, that's
Is that
true.
Correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So if I sign out, and hopefully nothing will blow up if I do, there we go. So I'm using the built-in Google Plus, the Google sign-in button. So which means that this actually saves me a lot of code, because instead of having to write gappy.authorize and all that, all I have to do is just place the sign-in button and set the properties.
Right. This is about the sign-in button's like 3 lines of HTML essentially that you're putting in that kind of does all the work for you. The main drawback and the reason I think we're showing you both ways of signing the user in is that this sign-in button has to appear within a span or within a div. And say for an HTML5 game like this, it's not a problem. But if you were, for example, creating a Flash game or a Unity game or something where it would be harder,
game,
where it would be harder to put a span on top of your game, and it would need to be outside the frame of the game where people might miss it or something like that, you would probably want to go with the more, closer to the metal JavaScript gappy.authorize call. So I mean, both methods work. If you're able to use the sign-in button, that is the preferred way. It also does a couple of extra things behind the scenes. I think it makes loading the +1 button faster and some other stuff like that. So I know that on behalf of the Google Plus team, they would prefer that you use this if possible. If, however, your game engine simply can't render a div on top of it, or it has problems, then go with the gappy.auth.authorize call.
Definitely. So the other item to look out for, which was actually a bug in the initial version of this game, is that if the user doesn't sign in, you have to be careful never to try and call to make any API calls when the user is not signed in. So notice that I'm not signed in, but I can still play. Of course, none of my high scores are going to be recorded, and I'm not going to be able to unlock any achievements because I'm not signed in. But this doesn't mean that I can't play. So the recommendation is make sign in optional. So users can sign in if they want, and if they don't want, you should provide pretty much the same gaming experience, minus the achievements and leaderboards and so on and so forth. So I can still play. It's still going to give me a score, but of course, none of that's going to get uploaded. And if I click the achievements button, I'm going to have this beautiful alert dialog saying that please sign in with Google to see achievements. Of course, in a production application, you shouldn't use alerts, but you should just integrate that into your game's user interface. Even better would be to disable the buttons. If only I knew what the HTML code for gray was.
So for when you tried to call, uploading achievements before when the user wasn't signed in, what happened?
What happens is you get JavaScript errors.
Okay.
So depending on the case, you might actually survive it, and other browsers just stop because of that.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, so it's always good practice to check if you're signed in before trying to do any API calls.
And I think we should probably point out this is one of 4 different sample applications that are available to you as web developers that will all be linked to from our downloads page. So this one, Firewall Defense, is the one that actually looks and plays like a game, and you can kind of see the potential, and it's actually fun. We also have a pure JavaScript version of the Type a Number Challenge. This is our fantastic sample game where you can enter a number and that's your score.
It's definitely our most user-friendly game.
Yes.
It's like if you want to score, just type it.
You type it.
Except you're playing in hard mode, because in hard mode you only actually get half the score you requested.
That is true.
So yeah.
That does demonstrate most of the major calls in terms of achievements, leaderboards. We also have the Type a Number Ajaxy PHP version, which shows an example of the client-server setup that Bruno had alluded to earlier in the presentation. So if you actually want to see what that looks like, and before the OAuth guys get after us, I want to point out the proper way to do it is to request a one-time code on the client that you then pass down to the server, which then exchanges for a token. You don't actually want to pass your OAuth 2 token down to the server if you can help it. So, but all of that is is displayed and working in the PHP sample app. Feel free to take a look at that, and it should be pretty easy to translate that to other languages if you're not using PHP on the back end. We also have the collect all the stars sample application, and that demonstrates cloud save in JavaScript. That's probably something that you should look at as well if you're at all interested in cloud save, and you should be, because it's kind of cool. We did not do a client-server version of that because if you have a server running, then cloud save probably isn't quite as interesting. But do take a look at that. And hold on, I'm being told to adjust my mic again. You know, I promised last time that I would wear a collared shirt, and then I forgot. So
you just have to stay perfectly still.
Right. Well, it's warm here in Mountain View, so I went with the T-shirt today. Forgot I was recording. So we should also ask, what about cheating? So all the high scores are being essentially generated and set up by the client. If I'm a JavaScript game developer, is there anything I can do to prevent cheating, or what strategies would you recommend?
Well, actually, on this sample, we don't do much to prevent cheating at all, because we want the source code to be readable. So we're not doing anything like truly special here. But of course, if you're doing a production game, you want to take every possible measure to make sure that people don't cheat. And that starts with maybe obfuscating your code and making sure that it's not that easy to tamper with it and so on. But of course, maybe people are going to find ways to cheat anyway. Maybe there's a special there's a glitch in your game logic that allows people to get an infinite score or something like that. And what you can do, of course, is you can manage that from the server side. And if you notice that somebody has cheated and has an impossible score, what you can do is call the management APIs. So the management and APIs are also documented in our web documentation. And what they allow you to do is you can authenticate as the owner of the game. So this means the user who created that client ID. And once you're authenticated as the owner of the game, you can hide a player's score. Hiding means that player, the cheater who has 1 million points, they're still going to see that they have 1 million points. But after you hide their score, nobody else is going to be able to see that they have that score. So they can go on and be happy that they have 1 million points, but then nobody else who plays the game is going to see that score anymore. So he can be happy alone.
And that's much nicer than deleting the score, because if it turns out that this was actually a fantastic player who really did legitimately get 1 million points, you're able to unhide them later.
Exactly.
We should also point out these management APIs work for mobile games as well. So you would need to build a little web client to make these calls. But if you notice, say you're building a mobile game and there's some people on the high score list that maybe shouldn't be at the level they're at, you can hide those scores as well just by building a little web app that would make these calls.
Exactly. But of course, the burden is upon you to make good judgments of what is a plausible score and what's not. So what you don't want to do is is hide the score from a player who actually legitimately has that score.
Yeah.
So this is pretty much up to you. So you have to be very careful to detect when cheating is actually happening and when it's not.
I'd also probably point out one of the best ways to deter cheating is just focus on the social scores. Like if I'm cheating on a public leaderboard, maybe I feel like I'm a badass hacker because I hacked Google or something. But like if it's a social leaderboard and I've cheated my way to the top, I'm just a jerk. Like my friends will
exactly. Exactly. Social leaderboards are they have this automatic control.
Which is nice.
Yeah, which is nice.
Hey.
Okay.
Did my microphone just jump?
It's part of our advanced technology from
right.
this lab.
Awesome.
Yes.
We should also probably point out that if you're a Flash developer or a Unity developer or
an anything else developer, basically.
Yeah, anything else.
Yeah.
And you are looking to make a web game like this, as far as I know, on Flash. Probably the best strategy I would recommend would be to make external interface calls. This is something that ActionScript has that essentially allows you to make calls to JavaScript from Flash. And then JavaScript also has a way that you can find your Flash object and make calls into it.
I think most browser-based plugins or technologies have a way in which you can communicate with JavaScript.
Yep.
And if you can do that, then you can call the APIs from JavaScript. Even if it's just a wrapper, you can just write like a thin wrapper over the APIs in JavaScript and then call it from your own engine.
Yeah, I really need to make a sample Flash game. It's I don't know if I still have it installed on my machine. We have to find out. It's been a while, but yeah, I think a sample might be good for the Flash developers out there.
Yeah, and if you're using anything else that's not web, the good thing about it being a REST API is that pretty much everyone can use it. as long as your language, platform, or whatever has a way to communicate with the interwebs, you can make REST API calls.
So, like, I mean, what if I'm making a downloadable, exe game?
Yeah.
Can I still do it?
Absolutely.
Well,
you have to go through the OAuth flow for downloaded applications, which is not as fun as the one for web, because you might have to pop up a browser where the user has to log in and authorize your token. But then users are pretty much used to that on downloaded applications, so it shouldn't be anything new.
So would I be able to like display a browser window within my game, or would I be essentially kind of tabbing out to like my browser, having the user go through clicking OK and then going back into the game?
It's pretty much, I think, up to every game, but the preferred flow is if you launch the actual browser. Because I mean, it certainly works with an embedded browser, but the user is going to feel much more comfortable if you pop up an actual browser, because the whole point of OAuth is that users feel very comfortable typing their password whenever they know that they are actually talking to the owner of that password. So they should be able to look at that URL bar and know that they are typing their Google password into a Google server. So that's the whole point of OAuth. So definitely prefer using an actual browser in that case.
All right.
Yeah, and then from that point on, I mean, once you're over that authentication part, it's pretty much very easy, because then you have the token and you can make REST API calls using that token until it expires. At which point you have to renew it, but then it's pretty much straightforward.
Cool. Well, all right. I think. Do we have anything else we're going to talk about for this session? That's about it.
No, I guess that's about it.
All right. Well, if you are a web developer, we're hoping that you found some of this useful. Be sure to check out Firewall Defense, which is now posted on our GitHub page, along with all the other fantastic JavaScript sample apps, and start adding some achievements to your games, because they're always fun.
Yep. And remember, don't tell anybody about the invisible Android technology. That's very confidential.
Still beta.
Yes.
We're looking for our last intern. We haven't found him yet.
Yep. All right, so thank you very much, and see you next time.